This is My Kind of Weird, a podcast where two people swap and pitch three kinds of media. Something watchable, something readable, and something listenable. To see if each other says at the end of the pod, that's My Kind of Weird. I'm your host, Anthony Pollock, and joining me today is comic book creator and content writer, Christof Bogacs. Christof, how'd I go at the pronunciation?
You did good. Yeah, you nailed it. It's people always get really uptight about the pronunciation, and I always tell them that, so my family's Austrian, but we anglicize it. So my writer name is Christof Bogacs, but just when I'm at home, because I'm lazy, I'm Christof Bogacs. So even my family doesn't pronounce it right. So no, never any pressure on that.
All right, Christof, are you ready to get weird with me?
That feels like a very loaded question, but yes.
All right, present your something watchable.
Yeah, so my something watchable is, and I apologize in advance for dragging you into this world, is the TLC reality show Seeking Sister Wife, which I am low-key obsessed with.
This season on Seeking Sister Wife.
Cheers! How many women is that now? You got a lot going on.
I'm currently talking to 5 women, but there's no possible way that I could continue to seek another sister wife if we don't correct the situation with Kayla.
Just make sure that you don't leave me and her alone.
Yeah.
There's not going to be any sex.
We'll keep you honorable.
Thank you.
Speaking of sharing, we already set the D schedule. Oh. I like it in the morning. Crystalline can be getting D in the night.
That's kind of scary to think about.
Yeah, so I don't know how much you know about the TLC sort of staple of shows, but they are like absolute reality trash. Like the bottom of the barrel kind of like, when you think about like the worst of reality TV, it was probably created by TLC. So the concept behind Seeking a Sister Wife is that they follow a bunch of families who are what is called a plural marriage, which is a polygamous marriage where they're very specifically a man has multiple wives. The man can, sleep with and have relations with any of the wives. The wives do not have relations with each other. They're very strict about that in the premise of the show. So
I think I've seen this show. Hey, I'm pretty sure I've seen it because I think it used to be on Foxtel, like way back in the day. They would show it alongside with this other one called Cajun Weddings, and that is absolute trash.
So look. I know so much about the trashy world of TLC. But so Seeking Sister Wife is a spin-off, as a lot of TLC shows are of another show called Sister Wives, which is about a Mormon man who has 4 wives. And that show's about 10 seasons deep. So for newer watchers, it's quite impenetrable. Whereas Seeking Sister Wife, they're already 4 seasons in, and each season they'll follow some of the same couples, but they also have new ones that'll come in. Yeah, and you kind of are following a bunch, so it's much easier to get up to scratch with it. And essentially, the show consists of 2 types of people, which are either people who are clearly sort of poly but very specific about it and aren't religious, and then horny religious men who clearly want to have multiple wives and are sort of jumping through hoops to kind of justify it religiously.
Yeah, it's not misogyny at all. It's just religion.
No, so the funny thing is that there are like the fundamentalist Mormons on there, and they tend to be like decent because they actually genuinely like believe in it. Whereas there's some sort of vanilla Christian men who clearly are just doing it because they want to have more than one wife, and it's very weird to watch, but also I can't look away.
Oh man, I didn't get a chance to read it when we were talking offline and watch it. And when we were talking offline, you're like, "Oh, I want to talk about this." I'm just I can't find it. I just can't find it. I don't know why, but
in Australia, it's on binge, but it is like there's only 1 season available here. It's a bit, I know in the States it's a lot easier to watch, but here, the TLC shows sort of get scattered around all the various streaming services.
All right. So my something watchable is a little independent production called What We Do in the Shadows.
The problems with living with other vampires are the vampires I have chosen to stay with.
I wanted to talk about general hygiene in the cell. Last night, there were all these people down there, half drunk.
Well, where did they find the alcohol?
No, they were half drunk. They'd been half drunk.
If you've got something to say, then damn well say it.
It's not hygienic!
Nandor is like a big turkey.
Have you heard of this little independent
Look,
production?
I was about to say, I've recently, you said you've been watching season 1, is that correct?
Oh, well, I just wanted to talk about season 1 because I've only seen the first season. So, yeah.
Oh, amazing. I'm up to date and I don't want to, I think the show is consistently strong, but I think season 1 and 2 are particularly good.
Yeah, okay, right. I like anything usually to do with vampires, and I think that the whole vampire, just sort of in context, I've never seen the film by Taika Waititi, but I like any sort of idea where there's vampires and then they're roommates, and then the inclusion of the energy-sucking vampire, which is played by Mark. That's
right, Mark Prosh. Yeah. How? God, I apologize in advance. I'm just going to be talking this entire podcast. But how familiar are you with Mark Prosh?
So I remember him from The Office. Right towards the end, he was like one of the guys that worked in sort of the bay, the loading bay. So I know him from that. And I think he's a character actor that's also popped up in a couple of things comedy-wise in America. But mainly from that.
So he's done a bunch of Tim and Eric stuff, and I knew him from this insane thing he did. So he played a character called K. Strauss, the yo-yo guy, and you can find it on YouTube. And basically what he realized is that morning shows in America will just book people without doing any vetting. So he basically emailed just as many morning shows as he could, saying, "My name is K. Strauss. I'm a performer who does, yo-yo tricks." And he would go on as this character, and he can't do yo-yo tricks, and would just throw these yo-yos around and toss them, and would just bring up really sad facts about his life and how his wife left him. And these morning hosts are just scrambling to figure out how they interact with this man. It's amazing. So he's just I just think he's just a very funny man, and just very he knows what he thinks is funny, and it will just defend it to the core. And I feel particularly in What We Do in Shadows, his comedic sensibility is it's probably the most, I think, mainstream it's ever been in terms of there's overlap between the show and then what he kind of does, which is just being weird and awkward.
Yeah, but it's sort of forced into the light by the other three vampires because their sort of humour is just so bleak and dark and just off kilter. It sort of forces his into the light, sort of.
Totally,
I love the fact that he's just an energy vampire because in the first couple of the second or third episode where he falls in love with another energy vampire. But they haven't quite fallen in love yet, and he's just observing her doing her work and then draining people of their time. I'm just I've worked with people like this in my day job.
I think the relatability of Colin Robinson as a character is excellent. I think the idea that everyone knows someone like that is very fun.
I love the inclusion of Matt Berry,
the best.
Which is just whenever there's someone from the IT crowd that just pops up anywhere, I get sort of excited. I didn't really know Kevin Novak beforehand, but
yeah, I'm the same. I had no idea who he was before the show.
I don't know if it gets explored further down the track, but is he meant to be a gay vampire?
Look, I think they're all
Camp.
I think they're all, queer. As this show goes on, they're definitely fluid. That comes up a lot.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a big big theme that comes basically is that they're vampires, they've lived forever, so at this point they're sort of not particularly
It's no
uptight about
lines.
sex with.
Yeah, but I love it. My favorite episode in season 1 is definitely the one where we have Machete turns up, Evan Rachel Wood turns up, Taika Waititi turns up, which is just absolutely hilarious. Because I believe they're the council because the three main vampires have killed another vampire, and that's a no-no.
That's right. Yeah, the council stuff's great.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just so much fun, and I feel like it's the first vampire property in a while that's done something new and interesting.
Yeah, it's funny because I've heard people like there was a meme that went online that was kind of like What We Do in Shadows, like had the amazing idea to be like, what if vampires were really dumb, and like they get so much out of that, like that premise, that idea that these like people have been around for thousands of years but have absolutely none of like the wisdom or like the temperament that you would expect, and are instead just insane.
And
so
like for instance, when what's his name? Kevin Novak's character.
Nandor the Relentless.
He comes to a realization that he needs to become a citizen. It's just kind of like, dude, you were around back when they were handing this stuff out. Why didn't you just become a citizen?
I mean, and I think that's the other thing that the show does really well, I think, is the idea that, the characters are a model, but they care about things that are really petty and really temporary. And at least I find episodes that deal with like petty shit and them kind of arguing or, talking about petty stuff are the best. And that's why I love the first season and second, especially because it really focuses on that. All the storylines are kind of about almost always a character being petty about something. And that's kind of where the show really shines, because the characters are so ridiculous and so dumb and so selfish. So, any kind of conflict always escalates.
Yeah, that's it. All right. Well, Christof, present your something readable.
Okay, so this is the one thing that I would actually describe as like good art out of the three things I'm talking about today, which is Fearies of the Fault Lines by Iris Compiet. And I'm not sure if I'm saying her last name right, but Iris is an amazing Scandinavian artist, and she does amazing watercolor fantasy work. So she illustrated and I believe wrote as well a Dark Crystal book that like details all the various monsters of the world. And so she's very good at like a very like Dark Crystal, so actually I believe Brian Froud, who was responsible for the Labyrinth creature designs, actually writes the foreword to the book. So that kind of gives you an idea of where she's coming from in terms of her art and her kind of voice. It definitely feels like, sharing some DNA with Freud, but then going in kind of like, a new direction as well. So yeah, basically Fearies of the Fault Lines is kind of presented like a journal that she's kept of all the sort of various fairy creatures that she's encountered in her time. And there's illustrations and lore. And it's really, really exceptional. It was just a delight to read. And, she's one of those artists, really, it's a storyteller that just kind of effortlessly weaves worlds in a way that, not everyone can. So I just think it's an exceptional book and I can't recommend it enough.
I'm looking at the art here, and this would make a really good coffee table piece, hey?
Oh, 100%. Although I would also encourage, I sat down and read it all, because I think the other thing is that the art is fantastic, but the lore that accompanies each kind of piece is really fascinating as well. And, that's, I think, again, what maybe sets her apart from other fantasy illustrators is that, that you feel like she can there's like full world that goes with it as well, and she's kind of able to talk about that. And I know recently she did some art for Magic the Gathering, and I'm very tempted to pick up her card just for the art because it's fantastic.
Yeah. It has sort of that childlike fantasy, but also dark
100%
fantasy.
Yes, and I think And I think that's what it has in common with, you know, the Brian Froud stuff, you know, because it's very like Labyrinth and
well, funnily enough, she did a Labyrinth bestiary book. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and she did a similar one for the Dark, I believe, for the Dark Crystal as well. So there's that real kind of like Henson, Freud DNA running through there, which I think is just brilliant. That idea that like you can make fantasy that is for that children can enjoy, but that can also be quite scary.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good log line. Make sure she doesn't steal that off you.
So I can't recommend the book enough. I think her work is just fantastic. You know,
nice,
an exceptional artist.
Nice. My something readable is Outcast, which just before we jumped on this call, I was actually finishing the first volume. So Outcast is by Robert Kirkman, and also by the art is by.
Is it Paul Azaceta?
That's it. Yeah, Paul Azaceta. Yeah.
Yes. I believe I read the first arc as it came out.
Colouring is by Elizabeth Brightweiser, and Russ Wooten is the letterer. That's the name I see a lot. So it's basically, it feels to me like The Exorcist, if The Exorcist were a comic book and if it was done better. Shots fired. I mean, you know, you can love The Exorcist all you want. I mean, I do. It's a classic horror film, but you know, it's not without its own flaws. But I guess the great thing about comics is you can expand on sort of those themes. So it's about this this guy who is sort of living by himself because he beat up his daughter and his I'm assuming his ex-wife, because he thought they were possessed. And as it sort of turns out, that they were, the daughter definitely was possessed. The guy's mother was possessed, so he's one of those people where everyone around him is possessed by a demon of some description.
Yes. Yeah, something about him that attract demons, or for some reason they're particularly interested in him.
And as it sort of is coming, I haven't finished the first volume. I have about 10 pages to go, but it's sort of they talk about the outcast, and you eventually find out he goes to prison to come across this possessed inmate who calls him the outcast, and sort of there's this feeling that the outcast is him, and it is someone who was probably possessed at one point, but he was rejected, or they couldn't keep him under their control for some reason. So what I really love about it is it's one of those comic series where Kirkman taps into the language of American sort of middle and lower class quite well, which a lot of people don't seem to. At least in the indie comics crowd, they don't really tap into finding the voice of the character, which you don't need a character to be talking grammatically correct, you know, and Kirkman has that understanding of it. He also has this understanding of sort of like pacing really well in this series as well. And I think it's just one of those books that he's done that he's just not as known for doing it, but it's lots of fun.
So the interesting thing about Outcast is I believe he sold it as a TV show before he'd even written the first issue.
Is there a TV show?
Yes, I don't believe it ran. I think it only ran a season. But yeah, I believe it was an AMC. I think it was an AMC TV show. And then the other interesting thing you bring up about his sort of voice, really kind of understanding, you know, like the voice of Middle America and that kind of culture. It's interesting because that's kind of where he comes from. And when he was talking about The Walking Dead, in the first kind of, you know, the initial characters in those books, he describes them as like people he kind of lived around and grew up around. And then later on, when he came and did Fear the Walking Dead, he sort of was like, well, now let me write this as if it's happening to people I'm around now in LA. So that's kind of the interesting thing about Kirkman. Before he comes from a really interesting time in comics, because I don't know if you knew how he got his start, but he basically borrowed a bunch of money, like 30 grand, and self-published his comic, got it printed and put it through Diamond. And that's how he kind of began to build an audience and eventually got picked up by Image. I believe that's a very like abridged version, but he sort of comes from a really specific time where you could kind of do that. Whereas now that's not really, getting into Diamond doesn't really mean anything because it's so oversaturated. It doesn't, guarantee you success or an audience, in the way that it kind of did a little bit more when Kirkman did it. But yeah, his body of work and him as a creator, I find really fascinating.
Yeah, I don't know what I don't know what it is with him. I think it's just like the way he writes is just a lot more relevant, and it just feels there's a sense of realism with the characters.
Yeah, I mean, I think what he does really well is that he's able to, if you look at all his big hits, right, they're all highly established genres. So you've got The Walking Dead,
got superheroes with Invincible.
Yeah, you've got Invincible, and somehow he's able to kind of, and even like his newer stuff like Firepower, is clearly referencing Iron Fist, but he's able to kind of come into these well-established genres and just bring a new angle, and Outcast to me kind of came across the same thing as well, right? He's coming into kind of like the Exorcist possession, subgenre of horror, and he has his own kind of angle, which is the idea of like the outcast and, and that kind of lore and stuff. So I just think he's, really good at cracking what you think is kind of a done genre, cracking it open.
Maybe that's why it makes it a good opportunity to strike.
Yeah.
All right, present your something listenable.
Again, I apologize in advance. So it's a podcast I'm obsessed with called Doughboys.
I suggested that we call our product a Whopper, knowing that this would convey imagery of something big. These are the words of Jim McLemore, co-founder of the nation's second largest burger chain, describing in his autobiography the conception of his company's signature hamburger sandwich. First launched in 1957 for sale at 37 cents, the Whopper celebrates its 65th anniversary this year, naturally at a much higher price point. But the burgery that slings this beefy big boy has no plans for retirement. It remains the brand-defining offering of this Pepsi of hamburger joints. And though the rest of its menu has evolved over the years, reacting to various industry trends, the current Chiking line reflects the ongoing Chick-fil-A-style chicken sandwich craze, the Florida-founded fast food franchise has remained a Whopper-centric universe.
And I was thinking a lot about the podcast and why I like it, which I do a lot. It's practically part of my personality at this point. But the premise and kind of the logline of the podcast is it's a podcast about chain restaurants. So in it, basically each week, these two guys in the States eat at a chain restaurant and review it. But like all podcasts, after they've been running a certain amount of time, they kind of develop, they're kind of like their own living organism. There's in-jokes and there's kind of an it kind of becomes a whole thing. So at this point, there's a lot of in-jokes and a lot of like the premise kind of, the underlying premise of the podcast is that these two guys who are both in their 40s now, have trapped themselves into a position where every week they have to eat fast food. And their Patreon makes enough of their income that they can't stop. And, and a story one of the hosts brings up often is that his mother has come to him crying, asking him to stop doing the podcast because she's concerned about his health. And it's played as for laughs. So it's kind of, it's hard to explain, and it certainly takes.
I think you explained it well enough.
So it's really these two men that are trapped in a world where they have to each week eat fast food and talk about it, and they're technically food critics, but they'll spend half the podcast talking about like how badly the food messed up their digestive system.
I think I need to listen to it from the start because, like you said, there's a lot of in jokes, and I think I made the mistake of going in listening to like a live show I found on YouTube. They seem to do a lot of that.
The live shows are hard because also, especially when they have a crowd, a lot of the time they'll like do, the bits or like, in jokes deliberately because the crowd loves them. And there are certainly a bunch of that. And yeah, I'm going to ramble for a minute here, but it's interesting. So the reason I got into the podcast is one of the hosts, Nick Weiger, is sort of, he's been in the LA comedy scene for a long time doing sketch, and he's written on a bunch of shows. He used to write for Funny or Die. He wrote on recently the show Earth to Ned, which is on Disney Plus. I'm trying to think what other stuff he's written on, but he's been in a lot of comedy writers' rooms, and his kind of style of comedy is aggressively what I find funny, which is something very stupid done over and over again, which I just think is the best. And that's to an extent what Doughboys is they repeat the same jokes, and it's the same stupid thing done over again. And I kind of got to know Nick Weiger because, are you familiar with the podcast Comedy Bang Bang?
No.
So it was a TV show as well, and it's another long-running podcast where basically comedians come on and they do characters, and they do improvisational characters. Sometimes I might have like a bit prepared or material prepared. Sometimes I might just have a really loose concept, and it's a really fun podcast. And he would frequently, every Halloween, go on as this character called Leo Carpazzi. And the story behind Leo Carpazzi is that he wrote the original version of the song, The Monster Mash. But because his lyrics were too visceral and too real, he had to tone them down through the studio into the version that we all now know and love. But he wants to play his original raw version of the song. And basically, is it okay if I swear, or do I need to? If not, I can censor myself because it doesn't.
No.
Okay.
Please.
So the original version of the Monster Mash is a song called The Monster Fuck, in which for 3 minutes, he graphically describes the universal monsters all having sex with each other. And it's the most disgusting thing you've ever heard, but even just thinking about it makes me laugh. And basically, every Halloween show, he would come on as his character. He would claim he'd written a new song, and every time he would play the Monster Fuck. And he did it. He's done it for close to 10 years at this point. So that kind of gives you an idea of the pedigree of the humor, given that he's one of the co-hosts and creators of Doughboys.
I mean, even just thinking about substituting mash for fuck, and then I'm just singing it in my head right now. I'm just. I
will send you like some videos of him performing it, because it's like the detail of the lyrics. Like, he would have spent, obviously he just sings the same song again and again, but to write the original one would have taken him an hour or two. And the fact he spent that much time thinking about the universal monsters all having sex with each other, and in very graphic description, is the best. Anyway, so that's how I got into Doughboys, and I just think it's the stupidest, funniest podcast. And the thing I kind of really like about it is, like I was saying, a lot of what's funny about it is the subtext, and I think it really benefits from you're sort of building an asymmetrical relationship with this people, where you really kind of can understand the deep lore and everything going on in their lives. So when they say something, that for a first-time listener might not be particularly funny, if you're a long-time listener, you get it because you kind of know what's going on in their lives and the previous jokes they've made and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, I just think Doughboys is a brilliant podcast. It is a little bit impenetrable, so I would recommend. Yeah, I don't know if you need to necessarily go back to the beginning, but I would recommend sort of picking a point and then just sticking with it and listening, and slowly through osmosis, you kind of will pick everything up. That's kind of how I did it. I maybe listened like 3 years ago when they're about halfway through.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so that is my very long way of explaining what Doughboys is.
All right. So my something listenable is a little American rock band, which a lot of people, I'm assuming, have never heard of, called Goon Moon. It's this really what the fuck project, which sort of incorporates stoner rock and sort of like disco synth and all sorts of weird shit. Made up of Geordie White, who some people know him as his stage name Twiggy Ramirez from Marilyn Manson's band, the bass player, and then the other guy that writes in this band is Chris Goss. And Chris Goss is kind of your sort of your background stoner rock musician who has done a lot of sort of being the puppet master in terms of like inspiring a lot of musicians like Josh Freese from Queens of the Stone Age, even like the guys from Tumbleweed over here in Australia. He's been one of those personalities who is just so instrumental in what the desert rock or the stoner rock sounds like. So it's I think it goes for 8 tracks from memory. There's one song which I think everyone needs to listen to at least once in their life called Weird Rock, which is just weird rock weird, just repeated.
Love that.
Just on and on and on and on with some just weird synth effects, and it's just lots of fun. It's not one of those bands that'll ever get into the charts, but it's just it's just a lot of stupid fun. It just feels like two guys who are quite established in their own life decided, you know what, let's make a project together. And it's lots of fun.
It certainly reminded me a little bit in terms of vibe, and also because is Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age also involved in it as well in some capacity?
I said Josh Freese. I meant Josh Homme. Yeah.
Yeah, because it reminded me a lot of, I don't know if you've listened to any of Eagles of Death Metal.
I could never get into it.
It just reminded me of that, not so much in musical style, but in that idea of like just the fun, and it was clearly kind of people riffing on music and a musical style they really liked and really like kind of having fun with it. It reminded me of that kind of same energy. Yeah,
nice. Yeah. He knows those guys pretty well, so that would be why.
But yeah, it's often like I mean, it's really interesting because that kind of music where it's sort of two people riffing on what they love, it's either some of the best stuff you've ever heard or really self-indulgent. I think in this case it skews more towards
both.
Good.
It's both.
Yeah,
no,
it's both. Elements where you're like, all right, well, these guys just had some studio time and just wanted to mess around.
Yeah, well, it has that vibe to it too, and that's probably why I still like it even to this day. All right, Christof, let's do the verdicts. Were any of my picks you're kind of weird?
So I think, I mean, what we do in Shadows, I love and I watch, so that definitely was. And then with Outcast, I read it a long time ago, but I think after chatting with you, I'm definitely keen to revisit it. I quite enjoyed what I listened to today of Goon Moon in preparation because I'm a pro. But it's definitely, I think with like stoner rock and that early kind of 2000 or like mid 2000s vibe, I don't think it hit me at the right time. So I didn't dislike it, but it certainly didn't, I think, grab me in the way that it grabs you.
For me, I think the Doughboys podcast is something that I need to listen more to. Like
hell yes. I'm always happy when I get another Doughboys fan.
And it's probably also because I'm in sort of that phase of trying to lose weight. So I'm literally driving, like my wife is in the car, and I'm at the point now where I don't even look at other women. I look at other restaurants. So KFC, there's fucking KFC. I could have some of that right now.
Yeah, totally.
Fearies of the Fault Lines, that looks like a really cool book just to own,
I think it's worth reading, but also it has a really lovely like flick through quality to it. And a lot of the time when I'm like writing fantasy or trying to do stuff in the fantasy space, I will sit down and just like flick through it just for a bit of inspiration because it's that kind of book.
And Seeking Sister Wife, it's probably not my kind of weird, but I feel like it's something I'll end up watching with my wife at some point.
Look, the way I describe any TLC show is like if you watch them, welcome to the family. If you don't, they're not worth your time. And I think Seeking Sister Wife is, I will talk about it all day, but I don't think I can honestly recommend it to someone who isn't already watching it.
Yeah, that's a tough one. All right, everyone, we're going to go for a quick sponsor break, and when we get back, we're going to be talking about lots and lots of meatballs. All right, everyone. Welcome back to My Kind of Weird. Christof, you have meatballs on the mind. So I hear. Your comic book?
Oh, yes. Sorry, yes. Meatballs. Sorry, yeah, meat for burgers. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I didn't actually plan this, but it makes sense that I was talking about Doughboys, given my kind of weird love and fascination with fast food, which is, yeah, kind of explored among other things in the new comic that I've just gone on crowdfunder now with the amazing Becca Kubrick called Meat for Burgers.
Nice. And where's the inspiration from?
Yeah,
besides food.
So Meat So Meat for Burgers basically started. So I've had the great honor of knowing Becca for almost 2 years now. And we have been and still are working on a bunch of pitches together. And we were working on a bunch of pitches. Publishers weren't biting. They weren't going anywhere. So Becca basically came to me and said, hey, Thought Bubble is coming up. I want to have a comic for Thought Bubble. Do you have like a 20-page short in you? And being the terrible writer I am, I gave her 20 pages of what is Meat for Burgers, which at this point has no end point, which is an ongoing series that we will make until we think it's finished or until we die. But yeah, so I first off, it came from that kind of sense of like just wanting to have fun. And then it also came out of the sense of frustration trying to kind of sell something and having to make it, monetize everything and make everything profitable. So that's kind of a big thing in Meat for Burgers. I mean, at its core, it's about these people kind of trapped in a fast food place and they can't get out. They don't know why they're there. The customers are these weird otherworldly entities. It's kind of a workplace, a drama mixed with cosmic horror. That's kind of about how they handle it. And thematically, it really is kind of about, I think at the moment we're in a little bit of a renaissance of media that is questioning capitalism. But something I kind of wanted to explore was the personal toll of being part of this system, kind of like the psychic damage that it deals, that kind of being this meat bag that is there to generate money, what that kind of does to your mind and how it like messes with your sense of self and self-worth.
Well, I'm sure we would all do without capitalism if we could afford it, Oh,
100%. I think, and that's the other thing that kind of wanted to explore, the inescapability of it, right? Is that you kind of can't get around it, and the way that it kind of just consumes all aspects of our lives, and particularly our imagination. It's really hard to envisage a world where some form of capitalism doesn't exist, and it really kind of is in all our media.
Yeah, I mean, the other opposing thought is socialism and communism, but then the problem with those two theories is, or that one theory is, it works, just not with humans.
That's one of the many privileges of being a writer is that, you can ask questions. You don't,
you don't have to answer them.
But yeah, amazing advice. It's like, you just ask the questions. And if you don't have an answer, that can be your answer. And I think definitely Meat for Burgers, we don't really know what the answer is, but what we can kind of talk about is how messed up and shitty it can feel to be part of this system. Particularly something that we've I think everyone has their own kind of relationship with capitalism, but personally, I have bipolar 2, and one of the diagnostic criteria for bipolar 2, or at least when I got diagnosed, was an inability to hold down a job and taking lots of sick days. So that kind of fascinated me, this idea that like just the way my brain is kind of wired and set up is already like in opposition, already makes it hard to function in this kind of environment. And that kind of fascinated me.
Like what type of like not able to hold down what type of job, or just
Great
jobs?
question. Yeah, just jobs. And, that's definitely, I've job hop a lot in my life, and it's definitely something that has affected me a lot. As I've gotten older, I've gotten better at managing it, but it's definitely, it's definitely something that is looked down upon. We're in this system where if you don't kind of fit in and can't hold down a job and regularly, attend and be a good little cog, the system is designed to shame you and make you feel like shit. And, a lot of people, whether it's mental illness, physical, chronic pain issues, anxiety, people, neuroatypical folks, there are a lot of reasons why, among the normal ones, why, working in the system can be challenging. And I think hopefully the point of Meat for Burgers is to be like, this whole thing is insane and it's wild that we've all decided it's normal. And it's okay, and it's just, hey, remember, this is not normal, this is insane. And, if you're surviving in this environment, we're all surviving in this insane environment, and it's a lot. It's so good on you for surviving. Is kind of hopefully the resounding kind of message.
It's interesting then. Have you found it easier since a lot of people have had to start working from home?
Great question. Yes, look, I definitely have. I mean, I'm kind of lucky, and I think a lot of people, that I know that are atypical, neuroatypical, or have, bipolar, a lot of what you do as an adult is learning to build your life in a way, that you can function well in. And so for me, I've always, even before COVID, I would work, part-time, and a lot of what I do is like, contract stuff. So I've always had flexibility, but certainly just now working from home being the norm, that's been really, really helpful. And I know a lot of people definitely don't want to go back into the office, not just for the obvious reasons, but also because, for a lot of people's mental health, it's so much better working from home and having control over that environment.
Oh, man. We were talking about what we do in the shadows before and energy vampires. I don't think I could work in an office again. I guess I've just been privileged enough to be in jobs where I don't have to go into an office over the last sort of 3.5 years. But it's like, man, like you get to work and you got these just assholes that spend an hour in the break room, and it's just like, dude, you haven't even started working. How about you start there? How about you start there? Is that cool with you? And no, don't just walk over to my no, don't send my desk. Oh man, now I've got to tell you to fuck off, and then you get pissed off, and it's a whole shit cycle, Christof. And I just want nothing to do with it.
No, totally. But that's kind of the other thing, right, is that in any workplace, basically the only thing that is joining everyone together is that they need money and they happen to be able to do this thing, which is kind of in its own right like a wild thought.
It's interesting the sort of the top end of town, i.e. managers, owners of businesses, have found it so hard to cope with. Isn't it interesting? I just find that's interesting. They can't force people to go back into work. It's 100%. An employee's world now. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, that is something that I think about. And again, it's something that I definitely kind of thought about in Meat for Burgers, this idea that they kind of want to, by paying you, they kind of want to own you in a way. They want to contain you within a physical space. And a lot of, workplaces, there's bosses who want people back just because it looks good. And what does that even mean? But it's that feeling of control, I think. And the fact that just doing your job isn't enough, someone has to kind of feel like they own and control you. And that kind of ownership aspect of capitalism, is so troubling. And I think messes with our heads a lot more than we maybe have time to think about.
Yeah, 100%. Your Kickstarter has a bit of time left, I believe.
Yeah. So we're actually doing it through
crowdfunder.
No, all good. I often accidentally refer to it as a Kickstarter just because they're the big dog. But yeah, so we're doing it through crowdfunder. And the reason for that is crowdfunder is kind of, doing a lot to support indie creators right now. And they've got a partnership with Thought Bubble. So the amazing Becca Kubrick, who's the artist and co-creator behind Meat for Burgers, is based in the UK, and they're going to be at Thought Bubble. So by doing it through Crowdfunder, we've been able to get a whole bunch of support through them, and we're going to be one of their featured thought bubble projects. But yeah, so it's Crowdfunder with no E, so just dr.com/meet for the number 4 burgers. Yeah, and so we're about, at time of chatting with you, we're about 2 days in. So it's going to be running for 3 weeks in total.
Okay. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so we've already hit our goal. So our goal was deliberately super low, just to cover the cost of printing. But, we really want to encourage people to get on, because, the book's done. The book's done. We can afford to print it, so it's definitely going ahead, and this is a great time for people to jump on. There's no risk, Unfortunately, just due to logistics, we only offer shipping for physical copies for the US and UK, but we do have a bunch of really good digital options for people not in those countries. Unfortunately, as you know, Anthony, trying to ship anything to or from Australia is just very expensive, and it's really kind of hard to factor all that kind of stuff in when you're running.
Oh man, I'm about to find out. I just got this anthology that I've been working on for a while. The printing's done. It's about to be shipped. When it gets here, I've got like 50 US backers, and I'm just my bank account is not going to like me.
I think Becca sent me, a bunch of copies of Meat for Burgers just so I had some copies of. And I think they were saying that it cost $30, £30 to ship from the UK to Australia. So it's just not, unfortunately, not economical. Yeah, so we've decided to go with digital awards for people outside of the UK and the US for that reason. That said, we work with a lot of great retail partners. So it's in Australia. It's available through the first issue is available through Cockatoo Comics. It's also in the amazing Silver Sprocket store. It's in a bunch of other stores around the UK and one in Ireland as well, I believe. Little Deer Comics. So it's so we're working with a bunch of retail places as well. And we have a link tree set up with all the different retailers where it will be in stock. And after the Kickstarter, a little bit after the Kickstarter as well, we'll be sending out copies of 2 for our retail partners. But the crowdfunder rather is the place to get in first.
Great. So where can they find the crowd? Do you have like a tiny URL or something like that I can put in show notes?
Yes, yeah, I'll give you a tiny URL. Yeah, and if you also go to my Twitter account, which is Christof Bogacs, so that's Christ with an OF on the end, and then BOGACS. That's where you'll find me. I've got it has my pinned tweet as well. And if you also go to Crowdfunder/Meat for Burgers, you'll find us there.
Fantastic. I think I'm going to go find a burger now.
I know, right? Every time I talk about it, I want to fill my body with trash.
All right. That's us. We're signing off. Christof, thank you very much for your time. Fuck you for making me think about fast food.
I'm so sorry.
And everyone go support his stuff. And that is it, everyone. See you next time. And you'll hear me next time on My Kind of Weird.